Hello there. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Marcia Butler, the webinar director at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guest and get started, I need to do a bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars, such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you today's educational presentation. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box. The presenters will answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. If you ask a question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. And if we can't get to your question during the event, we'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event. We want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. Well, I'd love to introduce you to our guest today. Sean McElderry is the CEO and founder of Monarch Wealth and Retirement Strategies. He is a certified financial fiduciary and has 22 years of experience in the financial services industry. As financial professionals, Sean and his team are committed to helping people create solutions for their retirement assets. Once they understand risk tolerance, time horizon, and goals, they work to develop a program that carefully balances investment strategies with preserving principal. And Sean, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the time to you. I'm excited to hear what you have to say today.
Great. Thank you, Marcia. I appreciate it. And so today I want to talk about, what a lot of people consider sometimes a stressful topic, possibly a topic that can create a little bit of anxiety. We've gone through a few crazy years, with COVID and interest rates going up and supply chain issues. And, companies are, of course, concerned about preserving, profits at the end of the day. So what we really want to focus on today is, in doing this 23 years, I've always found that, people are looking for when is the best time to retire from a company, how to maximize their benefits, how to take the advantage of whatever they're being offered at the company. And that's not always quite as obvious unless you're talking to someone that really understands your plan. So what we do as a firm is really get behind the scenes and look through our clients' plans and understand them on a deeper level. And that's really critical because, a lot of people have maybe an account at their 401k at work, and they see it as this place that they dump money every month, and it's either going up or down. And that's like one component of planning. When you're dealing with a financial professional, they should be looking at the whole picture. They should be looking at everything that you're dealing with and really trying to help you decide how to make big decisions based on what we call transitions in life. So those transitions really come down to getting a new job, changing jobs, being laid off, retiring, possibly changing job positions. Maybe you're making a career move. So Marcia, I'll let you go ahead and kind of get into the first set of slides here. As far as layoffs, furloughs, RIFs, demotions, we've got many people we've talked to in the last year that have approached us wanting to know what happens if they get laid off, what should they do? And that's actually really a smart way to think about it, is if you kind of sit there, hiding under your desk, if you will, wondering, what are they going to come for me? Is that walk from my boss down the hall going to be my day? Is this the day I get the pink slip? And that is one approach. Okay. But I think there's other approaches where we can say to ourselves, how can I actually be proactive here? How can I try to take advantage of maybe a situation that could be deemed bad and turn it into somewhat of a positive, if that's ultimately what's going to happen? So we'll talk about, the reasons for layoffs. Well, when you see the economy going through what it recently has, we've had a very strong economy, even through COVID. Businesses have been profitable. It did weed out some of those that were maybe on the edge, or maybe that business owner that had been meaning to retire soon decided this is the time. I'm not gonna fight it anymore. Okay. But for those big companies, especially, it comes down to the shareholders, right? We know that they're going to lay off to reduce costs, to raise the stock price. And this is if you think behind all the emotion and fear of it, this can be more of a logical decision for companies, which unfortunately you might be at the short end of the stick on that. But at the same time, it might be short-lived. These companies might be cutting costs temporarily, and when the economy turns around, they're going to need to rehire. So we can talk about that. Then there's other reasons. There's outsourcing, and there's companies that are merging and they don't need as many employees. Look at what happened recently with Twitter. Okay, it's a good example where I don't think most of those people are going to be coming back anytime soon, even if they maybe if they're needed, they wouldn't want to because they've moved on. Okay. And then there's seasonal jobs, and there's technology changes, and people being replaced by automation. So there's all these reasons that we are aware of, and you're going to know that better than I am. I have no idea for your position whether it's going to eventually go away, or whether you're going to be replaced, or whether it's temporary. So that's something you should think about. We can go on to the next one here. If you are going to be laid off, and it's a traditional layoff where they just tap you on the shoulder and that's your last day, you are going to be eligible for unemployment typically, unless there's some very particular circumstance. You're going to have access to COBRA. What COBRA is really is just a bridge until you either find a new job or you decide what medical to go on. I'll add one little piece in there. COBRA is usually quite expensive. It's going to be the cost of what your plan is through the employer if you weren't being offset by the employer. So it's typically quite expensive. Under the new Affordable Care Act, ultimately, it's going to be better to probably go through there if you did get laid off to find your medical. The one reason you might keep COBRA is really if you were going through some kind of major medical situation and you didn't want to have any disruption in that. So that's critical. But if you're perfectly fine and nothing major is going on and you get laid off, the first thing I would do is talk to your HR about what your benefits are if you continue them through the job, or what they would be now that you might have a reduced income or no income if you went through the Affordable Care Act, because that could be much, much less expensive for you. And you're going to have every option on the planet through that, as opposed to maybe just that one or two choices through the company plan. Furlough, we've seen this. This typically happens when companies are on the fence about how fast they can reduce people. They're trying to keep people on staff for a period of time, where they might even bring you back on, or eventually they're going to let you go. They might give you a 6-month or 1-year window. We've seen that with a lot of the telecoms, even some of the aerospace companies, where they say, hey, you're going to be laid off, but it won't be until 6 months or a year from now, or something to that effect. Similar situation. And then the next one would be reduction in force. This is one, especially if you're a union member. If you're part of a union, this can have a big effect. So what a reduction in force is the company is typically laying off a number of people. They're not so concerned who goes, but depending on a union contract, especially, they're going to let the senior staff typically choose to go. Now, it's kind of strange to think you're being laid off, but you're raising your hand to say, I want to take this, please lay me off. Okay. But if you haven't thought this through before, you might want to be aware that if there's a reduction in force, okay, it might be the type of situation where, you were planning to retire in the last couple of years, but you didn't, for a variety of reasons. Possibly you stayed, but that your time is getting close to retirement. Maybe it's a year or 2 or 3 away. And if they tap you on the shoulder and give you this RIF, you usually are going to get some type of severance. Okay. You might even get a little bonus on top of that. And then you also, surprisingly, most likely will qualify for unemployment. Okay. Now, I have to say most likely because it can depend, and you always want to double check. But there are some things to keep in mind if that's the case for you. One of them that's very critical is if you receive an annuity from the company, or a pension lump sum from the company, that can have an effect on whether you get unemployment. So what you don't want to do is if you do have a pension lump sum, that's where they give you your whole pension in a check. It's rolled over to an IRA. We help people with that all the time. If you get that, when you're filling out the unemployment forms and it says, are you receiving a pension from your company? What they're referring to is the monthly annuity. And typically the monthly annuity could actually prevent you from getting the unemployment. You'd have to make absolute sure that it's not. But for those folks that when they answer it incorrectly, oftentimes they'll be rejected and then they have to go fight it in court. But if it's a pension lump sum, okay, and they ask that same question and you did take a cash out, you want to make sure you answer that question as no, I'm not receiving a pension. What they're referring to is a monthly check, okay? Because that monthly check is now looking like income to you. Whereas if you're taking a pension lump sum, that could be deferred. You have the option, it's treated like an IRA, and no one is going to force you to take income from it. Therefore, you would be eligible for unemployment. So that's critical that you know how to answer those questions. And again, same thing with COBRA. Okay, still have that option. Of course, demotion, you'll see a lot of people, they're cutting hours, they're messing with people's pay, they're reducing their job title. You might be protected again if you're in a union position. We've seen situations where people are actually promoted from management, from hourly being a union member to being management, only to come to find out 2-3 years down the road that they lost tons of benefits because they're not protected by the union anymore. So be careful. Sometimes a promotion isn't always what you think. And especially at the telecoms, some of the aerospace, some of the healthcare, all sorts of companies, we've seen this happen with, where you think, oh, I'm a manager now. And then sure enough, your benefits aren't nearly as good as when you were making maybe 5-10 grand a year less with half the responsibilities. And now suddenly you realize your benefits have just been, chiseled away for you. So important to pay attention to that. Another thing with demotion is under some union contracts, they'll offer you a job. And if it's within a certain mileage radius, if you don't take it, then you're forced out. So there's always going to be things they can do, like, hey, you work in whatever city, and now they're saying you're going to have to fly out of state to move. Basically, you can't protect yourself under those situations. You either move or you're forced into a layoff. Okay. So let's try to make this a little more of a positive thing, and how you can take some of the fear out. So if you're going to be laid off, okay, is there an opportunity in this possibly? And this is going to be, very much where one-on-one we can kind of customize some ideas for you, and understanding where you work, what your benefits are. There's a lot of folks we've worked with in the last year, especially back in 2022, that were telling us we're waiting to get laid off. Okay. Now, why is that? Well, some people don't have quite the retirement package they'd hoped for. They're stuck in their job. They know that their upward momentum is maybe not great, and they're looking for a change. Okay. So getting a layoff means you might receive a chunk of money and get some benefits where you're going to have some time to look around and find where you might want to go. But people are, they're in fear of this because it's that immediate, I'm not going to have income. So the whole idea here, and we'll kind of circle back to this at the end, is it's about having a strategy in place. Okay. Not, like I said in the beginning, not hiding under your desk and waiting, but rather, what is your strategy here to where you can try to lower the fear and maybe find some opportunity in it. So what can you do to prepare? Okay, well, if you think you're okay for a while and you don't see anything on the near future, depending on where you are in your career path, look at what options you have. How is your debt? Do you have an emergency account set up? Do you have some money that you can access? We can talk to you about things like this. If you're over 55, your 401k, if you separate the year you turn 55, that can be accessed without penalty. Okay, so that can be a great tool for having emergency money, but you got to be over 55 when it happens, or at least turning 55 that calendar year when you leave. If you have a Roth IRA, any of the money you put into that can be taken out penalty free at any age, not the earnings, just the part you put in. The earnings have to stay, they can't come out. Start working on
Isn't
that
there,
resume.
oh, Sean, isn't there some sort of time limit on that one? Isn't there like an exclusion period on withdrawing Roth funds?
Well, the earnings have to be in there at least 5 years, but the contributions don't.
Oh, okay.
But you're right, there is time frames. And then of course on IRAs, it's 59 and a half or later. But if you do have a 401k, and if you're not putting into one, then that might be time to start thinking about getting some money going into that 401k. And if they don't match you at work, then you talk to someone like us and we could help you set up a plan, whether it be a Roth or an IRA, depending on your situation, to try to have some type of an escape hatch that if you don't end up needing it, great. But if you do, it's there and you have some money that you can touch. But start thinking about, like, do you like what you do? Have you been thinking about maybe doing something different? So kind of what I've noticed with a lot of the clients that I've helped retire / take a layoff out of choice or out of not having the choice is that most of them that want to go back to work surprisingly are able to find it. Okay. And you kind of know who you are. If you're that type that's super motivated, you're going to get on it, you're going to go out there and you're not going to give up till you find something, you're going to find it most likely. It's the people that kind of like, well, I turned in like 10 resumes and no one called me. Okay. You're going to have a hard time. You have to be very aggressive these days. And it's not like if you've been at a job like many of our clients where they've been there for 20, 30 years, those folks haven't interviewed in a long time. If you're in your 20s or 30s now, no problem. But if you're north of 50, you've got to kind of start looking into this and learning, how do I make a resume? Get someone to help you write it. Talk to your kids to help you write it. Go to a lot of the libraries have resume writing classes at no cost, or the community colleges do. Okay. Do these things to help get your brain around, do you want to stay in this position or do you want to do something different? And are you financially at least covered for a period of time to go through that transition? So how could it benefit you? Okay, sounds like a funny thing. I'm getting laid off and that's a good thing. Well, maybe not always, but like I said, if you have a plan in place, maybe you didn't want to work as many hours. So you wanted to lower your time frame of hourly work week. Who's this suited for? Well, we have a lot of folks that are, they're having grandkids that they want to spend more time with. They have elderly parents that they want to take care of. They want to travel more, whatever that is, and they want to do something that's less stressful. Okay. I have a client that just recently retired. She was doing delivery for food, driving around during the day and working a full-time job. And now that she's left her full-time job, she's just doing that full-time, and she loves it because she can travel. She makes some decent money to fill in the gaps, and she had a plan. Okay. But if she didn't have a plan and she just walked out the door, that's where people tend to get a little more depressed. They kind of get stuck. It's always easier to find a job when you're working. Okay. It's always, even if you have someone that says, hey, if you walk out that job tomorrow, you call me. And I have many of our clients are like that. They've been starting a network. They've been doing things to get out there. They've been working on that LinkedIn page and getting their resume figured out, and realizing that if you are north of 50, okay, one thing I've always suggested to people is, if you started at ABC Company in 1985, you might not want to put that down as your job on the resume, okay? Because you just gave away the fact, if a 22-year-old is looking at that resume, they think you're like ready to retire, okay? So think about, like, you just need to show them 10 or 15 years. Just, maybe you had a change in job title, maybe your company merged. Just show them what you did for the last 15 years. Then when you get the interview, you're going to go ahead and disclose whatever the heck they want, but let them see that you're a vital, healthy person, you're ready to go. And because otherwise, there is stereotypes that get involved. And so I always tell people, you don't want to brag about being somewhere for 35 years necessarily. Okay. Brag about your knowledge, what you can bring the company, and then let that speak for itself when you get the date to actually sit and meet. Okay. Don't give all your cards away on that resume. Go ahead to the next one, Marche. Thank you. So to get a better job, so let's think about it. These companies are now downsizing to hopefully boost their stocks. Okay, we want to get the stock price up. So they lay off their people. They've now raised the stock price. A year goes by. The economy hopefully starts picking up even more, maybe in 2 years. And what are they possibly going to have to do? Well, if you talk to many of our retirees, they get phone calls 6 months, a year's down the line, whether it was a layoff or not. Hey, we need you back. No one knows how to do what you did. We're like dying over here. Okay. And again, you know who you are, right? You know you're that one that everybody calls when you're on vacation. They're going to call you back. They can't replace you with someone out of college. So if that's your case, just know that you might be able to make a move to another company, or there's a good chance they'll bring you back. So remember this too. Don't burn your bridges. Okay. Don't be that person that's so mad that they go in and say something to their boss, or they send out a nasty email, because you never know if they're going to call you back in 6 months or a year or sooner. It depends on whether you're in a union contract, your management, because remember, you are a chess piece. And when they don't need you or when they need you, you want to be in that place if that's the case, if you want to go back. But as far as opportunities go, I think I've had so many of my clients that, got laid off in their late 40s, early 50s, or even younger. And they were like, Sean, I can't believe how I was able to go out there. I got a raise, I got better benefits. I'm working with people that I actually enjoy now. Okay. And maybe you weren't in the best environment, because now you might even have the ability to kind of call your own shots. And you may not see that in your current situation because you've kind of grown over time through this group of people. But when you present yourself to a new group and suddenly they're like, oh, look at all this person's done, you now take on you can start fresh. Okay. And sometimes making those moves can really give you opportunity. Many of our clients moved out of state, depending on where you live. If you're in one of the states that's a certain, more high cost, like we're in California. Okay. If you were moving to a state somewhere in the Midwest where, maybe people aren't getting paid as much, but you're bringing this experience from a very high pressure area. Companies that are in other areas that don't have quite that high pressure see you as a commodity, as an asset. They see you as someone with a different picture of the world, and they're willing to pay more for that. Sometimes you might be able to keep a similar salary, even though you move somewhere where the cost of living is lower. And maybe you sold that overpriced house and took the equity out and you bought and downsized. So this is your chance really to not just get a better job, but maybe really evaluate where you're at. And is this a time to start making a life transition, a shift to try to improve maybe where you were stuck? Maybe you weren't making enough and you were just getting by, and that's why that layoff is so stressful. So use this as a way to, up your game, if that makes sense. Maybe you hate your job, you hate what you do, and you really just don't even want to do it ever again. You want to walk out the door and you're like, I will do anything, but I want nothing to do with that anymore. Okay, awesome. This is your chance. That layoff is going to give you some freedom to figure out what you're going to do. Think about it beforehand, hopefully. Maybe get some training, take some time to retool, and think about what other things you're going to pursue. And we've had many people that just complete different career changes. And, I talked to them later. I mean, I have one guy that was in a very high tech position, and he wanted to build custom cars. And now he's got a shop and he's working with this detail place, and they remodel, old Mustangs and Chevys, and he's making enough money. He loves it. He enjoys it. And it's like he said, if I get tired of it, he's like, I could just walk out the door because I already know that I have my retirement set up and I'm doing okay now. Hopefully, if you have that. So it's a good chance to make that change. And again, if you're near retirement, or you just want to downsize, or I should say reduce your work spent, again, this is a time to look at that. Maybe you want to take something part-time with more flexibility. A surprising number of our clients that had 80 to 100,000 plus jobs, or were in executive positions, are doing things that you would never expect to see them doing. And I think sometimes ego can really get in the way with that. Why would I want to go take a job making X when I've been making this much this whole time? Why would I do that? Okay. Well, quality of life. is really what we have to think about. That's where an advisor like us will do an analysis to see if you were to make a certain amount of money, and let's say we were able to cover most of your expenses, but maybe you wanted to work for a little bit more, you needed still to keep saving. Well, if you could make the same but work less, would that be an improvement for you? And so the way you determine that is you've got to talk to someone about having a roadmap. Where are you at? Where do you need to go? And what do you need to get there? And that's what an advisor does. Okay, you're not going to get that from the 401k where you're throwing money in every month. You really have to get in there and say, okay, where am I? And the mistake most people make is they get stuck because they don't know how to do this formula. They're not looking at all the factors. They're just looking at how much money do I have? How much do I need each month? And they're going, well, I'm going to run out in 8 years. They're doing simple math. You've got to have someone run a plan. Look at your social, what your medical costs are going to be, when your mortgage is going away, cost of living, taxes, all of that. You can go to the next slide, Marche. So how do you prepare? That's kind of what I was getting to, is we can have a fairly smart and simple conversation that is going to get into what do you have, what are your expenses, what do you owe, and do what's called a cash flow analysis. And this is something we do complimentary for anyone that wants to talk to us. We'll put it together. Many firms do charge for that. We believe it's just part of the process of showing you what we can do and showing you how we can help you. So we do this for everybody. And really the benefit is to put a plan together that's going to give you an idea of, if I walked out the door tomorrow by choice or not, am I going to be able to at least pay my bills and keep that going through time? Okay. And if not, what do I need to supplement it with? How much extra do I need? And for most people that we've seen that don't even necessarily think they're doing that well, it's usually not as bad as they think. And I know it can be scary sometimes. And a lot of times people don't like to talk about money, but this is where sometimes you got to just peel the Band-Aid off. And most people say, I feel better now. I feel like I actually have a plan that's giving me some direction, and I don't just need to work till I'm 95. Okay. But more importantly too, is if you know your plan, it can prevent you from spending yourself into a trap. What do I mean by that? We've had many clients that went out and bought some crazy car. They're going through their midlife, whatever. They decided to move into a house they really couldn't afford. And they did it at the wrong time in their life, where maybe it was a too aggressive move. And now they have to keep working, or they have to sell the house or get rid of the car. And maybe now it'd be a loss and they can't because they're stuck in it. So by having that roadmap, then you and your spouse, or just you, we can actually model it and say, okay, if you wanted to make this purchase, what is this going to do to my numbers over time? Is it going to make them better, or is it going to be detrimental? And that's really critical here. So always making sure that you have a plan. And we can go to the next slide, Marche. We'll touch briefly on this professional networking. Great. I mean, get out there and talk to people. Nowadays there's so many job searches online, and I do hear of people finding jobs online, but the statistics are not great. Okay. Really, the way you're going to find a job the majority of the time is by who you know, who you are advertising yourself to. How are you putting yourself out there? Your best word of mouth is colleagues that know, trust, and love you. They're the ones that are going to talk you up and say, hey, if you need someone, I know someone that's looking. Okay. And you want to talk to them. Getting those kinds of introductions are critical, not just sitting back and waiting and then putting it on Monster or whatever. Much of the stuff on those job sites are, for sales positions that you might never want to do, where they're very specific. Another thing when you're doing, when you're interviewing, is to keep in mind that, nowadays people are not going to chase you down. You have to chase them down, almost to the point of you feel like you're stalking them. I always joke. Okay. I've had people say, like, I put all these resumes out, not one person called. And I'm like, so what did you do exactly? They're like, well, I put them out there and no one calls me. And I'm like, you could put 1 million out and no one will call you. Okay. You need to follow up thank you letters, call and talk to people that work in the office and say, how do I get in front of your boss? Do you like working for them? Who's the best person to talk to? Anything you can do creative to get in. So that's where a professional network is. They're going to see you in person. You go to some of these different events that are around town and get to know people, and that's going to be a good way to do it. So financial and mental readiness. So, when we talk about this, I think a lot of people, because they get scared, they tend to freeze up. It tends to stress them out. They tend to stop communicating about what's going on, right? So what you really need to do is, and what I've seen is I've had many clients where we'll have a couple that one wants to retire, or maybe they're getting laid off, and the other one's just not mentally in that space, okay? But it really comes down to timing, numbers, when is appropriate for you to get out of the company in some cases, whether it's a layoff or not. And so sometimes just having a meeting with a planner that is very good at dealing with creating a roadmap for you can bring a couple together so that you're not looking at things through your own ideas and agendas, okay? Because a third party can be more neutral in the sense that they're going to point out the things that maybe neither of you are aware of and focus on those things rather than, well, I have to keep working for 5 years, so why shouldn't you? Well, we hear that all the time with couples, but when the one couple that's going to have to keep working suddenly realizes that their spouse, by not leaving, loses money that we've shown them, suddenly the conversation is like, you need to leave. This happens all the time.
Can you walk through that scenario really quickly? Because I don't know that people understand how that could actually happen.
Oh, walk them through it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So especially depending on where your job is, and we talk about this in some of our other presentations in depth, but I'll just kind of touch that briefly, is especially people with a pension lump sum where they're getting a cash out, okay? They usually have to be at a job for so many years, and then at some point, the longer they stay, they tend to lose money, okay? And currently with interest rates rising, even though it's a little counterintuitive, as interest rates go up, that pension lump sum can drop. And it dropped a lot for people last year, and it's going to keep dropping if you have a pension lump sum, as long as the government keeps raising rates. So we have clients that didn't leave, let's say, during that raise of interest rates last year, that dropped 20 to 30% in their pensions because they simply liked their jobs and they were fully aware of it, but they wanted to stay and keep working. Unfortunately, for some of them, when they woke up this year, missing the opportunity to take that cash out because their spouse really was not hip on the idea of them leaving either. We have a client recently that she lost almost $250,000 in her lump sum and then was in turn laid off this January. Now, she got a little bit of a severance and she'll get unemployment, but not nearly 200 grand plus. So in that case, had she left last year, she would have been a lot better off financially, but since she didn't, it's one of those things. So that's where we really have to have that one-on-one conversation and figure out what you have. If you only have an annuity or monthly payment option, that's not going to be as big of an effect. So how does a financial advisor really help you? Well, we've covered a lot of it, but really the key is have a plan. Let someone walk you through and help you understand what your benefits are. Remember, your human resources, your company, your 401k, these are all third parties for the most part. Okay, you're dealing with people that are going through flip charts. We've literally talked to people at very well-known 401k providers. I'm sure you could think of a few that when you get them on the phone, they're like, oh, well, you know what? I don't actually deal with these people. I'm really a specialist. It's only these two. Let me get you to the right person. After they gave us like 5 answers that were wrong. Okay. They're not there to help you understand how to get the most money. They really aren't. Their goal is to just simply get you your answers, do their due diligence, make sure that, you're okay. And then, but they're not going to say, hey, you really should do this if you want to get more over time. Okay. So where an advisor can help is we know the questions to ask, especially our firm, we specialize in this. Now, not all advisors do. Many advisors are very generalized, but when it comes to helping people transition from a company into retirement or to the next job, this is what we're really experts at, is watching all the different, potholes and things to be concerned about to make sure that you walk out the door with everything you're supposed to, and you didn't leave too soon and lose something, or you didn't stay too long and lose something. There is that sweet spot for most companies that we have to help you figure out. So having a plan, doing a cash flow analysis, those are all critical on how an advisor can help you so that you feel prepared. And I think that's a good place to leave it. If anyone wants to go through that process, they can always reach out, and we basically walk you through the steps on what you need. Do we have any questions, Marche?
Yeah, we do have some questions here. And like Sean said, you can reach out to Advice Chaser, and we'd be happy to set you up with an appointment with an advisor that would be a good fit for you. All right, so here's our first question. I had the opportunity to work as an independent contractor for a job I was previously employed in as a W-2 employee. It's not the same company that they were employed at, they said. How do I prepare financially for this? I know I'll have to save more for taxes. What else do I need to know? They've always worked as a W-2 employee. They're looking at that independent contractor thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing is I would, if I was, kind of consulting with someone in that case, we'd first look at all your benefits from your old employer and make sure you dealt with those, got your 401k situated, and all ready to go to start growing towards retirement. Make sure you get your benefits, your medical. We go through all that. As far as the new job, you definitely would want to get a tax person, which we have people that we work closely with, that are part of our group, and essentially help you figure out, that you're going to have to pay your quarterly taxes. You're going to have to make sure you're setting that up. And then it might get more detailed depending on how long you're going to do this, where you might want to open an LLC or an S Corp to help you. So there's some more strategies there to where you can, benefit yourself, where, if you've already contributed to Social Security for a long time, you might want to, pay yourself differently through the corporation and then as an employee of yourself. And you can also, there's a lot of things with that. So that's where working with an advisor and a CPA can really help align those to make sure that you're taking advantage now, because once you're essentially becoming a business owner in a sense, even though you're just working as a 1099, you're now your own business. You can become the business of, it could be your name and LLC or S Corp. And you can set that up, and you can take advantage of different types of deductions and write-offs and create your own 401k or SEP or Simple IRA. Those are all things that are going to help you defer taxes now, because you're not going to have a 401k through your job anymore. Okay. And then there's questions like, will you have employees, or is it just going to be you? Depending on how you answer those things will determine what type of corporation you want or what type of plan you'd set up. But making sure you keep up with those taxes quarterly is critical, unless you want to pay penalties each year. So you've got to keep on those every quarter.
Thanks. That could be a whole webinar in itself for sure.
That could.
All right. What is typically included in the severance package?
Typically in a severance package, they're going to give you so many weeks of pay plus some type of a bonus. It's usually based on years of work. A lot of times we'll see they give you 2 weeks of pay for every year of work. They might give you some type of a bonus, or it could just be a flat severance. Sometimes they'll give you medical for, you typically have medical for at least 30 days. Sometimes they'll give it to you for longer, not common. Okay. But you do have the ability to go on COBRA. Sometimes they might give you some type of a retraining expense that's built into it. And keep that in mind too, is in that year that you're in transition, you're going to have deductions for resumes and coaching and training for that new job. So you want to make sure you tell your tax person that too. But as far as the severance, it's pretty much just a chunk of money. And then, there could be some kind of a benefit you get as far as perks, depending on where you work. So there could be little things, but primarily it's the money from the severance.
All right, we have a couple more questions here. Have you, just in your experience, what do you see that other things like unused vacation pay, other things like an annual bonus, what typically happens in those? And I know it's different for every single company, but.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Most companies, depending on how you accrue vacation, you should get your vacation that's accrued up to at that point, however they calculate it. Okay. Bonuses are going to be very dependent on like the time periods. And that's one of those things you'd probably want to ask your boss how that would work if you got laid off, because that can definitely vary. Personal time, if you have what they call P time, typically what we've seen is a lot of companies will not give that to you as a check. So you want to make sure you take your P time before your final date. So if they're giving you like a 30-day layoff, let's say, where you're going to be on the books for 30 days, then you'd want to probably take your P time before that, unless you're the exception and they count P time the same as vacation. But for a lot of the companies, we'll see them, they'll give you your vacation, but they won't typically give the P time.
All right, and then one more question here. Can you tell us what happens to a 401k once you leave or are laid off?
Yeah, so if you're, depending on your age, a 401k, and this is something we always try to help people understand, that a 401k is really a vehicle to accumulate money. And it is also a vehicle where if you're lucky, you have a match. Okay. When you leave a job, what we see oftentimes is people will call us up and they've got a 401k going back to their first job in high school. And it's all these little plans. Okay. What really is ideal to do is set yourself up an IRA that we would consider what's called a self-directed IRA. Now, self-directed doesn't mean you're all on your own out in the, this big barren space of picking things. If you're working with an advisor, we're going to help you with that. So we'd set up an IRA for somebody, and then we put all those 401ks into one place. So what's the advantage of that? Well, number one, you don't have to log into 5 places to look at it. Number two, by having more assets in one place, you usually have opportunities to get into better choices. And you also have the opportunity to, in some cases, reduce your fees, because when you have more money, the fees can go lower. So better access, lower fees. And really the third thing is, making sure you don't have overlap. This is a huge problem. We have clients that have money in all these different accounts, and then we look at them and they're basically pretty much buying all the same stuff. And they're having, too much of this stock and too much of that one. They don't realize that you have to be diversified, meaning don't put all your eggs in one basket. It doesn't mean having 5 plans. It means you have one plan that's monitoring where your eggs are. Okay. So when they say don't put all your eggs in one basket, I think back to my grandfather, who, when he passed away, he had money in like 7 different banks. Okay. And we had to like hunt this down. And it wasn't a lot. It was just, he was afraid because he grew up in the Depression and he didn't trust anybody. And this is how he thought. Nowadays, we have insurances for that. The SIPC, the FDIC, private insurance, it'll cover you pretty much for what you have against fraud and theft and things of that nature. You should always be asking whoever has your money, how am I protected? How am I insured? There's not really a benefit to having it in 10 different accounts for any reason. So when you leave, you'll be able to move that 401k to an IRA, tax-free, penalty-free. It's just what they call a rollover. Okay. But if you separate the year you turn 55, then that's where you'd want to have a conversation with someone about, do I want to leave some or all of it behind because I might need access to it, and that would prevent penalty. That's a long answer, I know, Marche, but it's
a good one though,
so.
because it's one of those things that you don't think about, but it's really important, and it could save you a lot of money in the long run, like you said.
And I'll add one piece to that. If you have a loan on your 401k when you separate, okay, you do not have to pay it back. Okay, you can just let it go, and basically it will come up as a tax event. So if you owed $5,000 on it, it's just going to add to your income, and you might owe $800-900 and $1,200 in taxes. If you're over 55, you won't even have to pay the penalty on it. If you're under 55, you would. But that's a whole nother conversation, where when you take a loan from your 401k, you're paying taxes twice. Okay, I'd have to kind of explain that in detail, but if you owe a large amount, talk to someone about what the best strategy is, because it's not necessarily paying it off.
All right. Well, it's a good one to end on, leaving us wanting for more, Sean. Want to thank you so much for being here and for the organizations that have made this webinar possible today. And to our attendees, look for a link to the replay of this event in your email, and you're welcome to share that with friends or family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners is committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce you to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Well, once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.